8:43 a.m., downtown Chicago, Loop District, where money walks like it owns the sidewalk. The revolving glass doors of Dominion Capital Bank spun slowly, letting in a woman who didn't belong, at least not in the eyes of everyone watching. She wore a faded baseball cap pulled low, scuffed sneakers, a beat-up backpack slung over one shoulder. No designer bag, no watch, no shine. Danielle Brooks didn't dress to impress. She dressed to disappear. She walked in with calm steps, unbothered by the stares. She wasn't here to make a scene. She was here to listen, to watch, and to confirm what she already knew. The marble floors gleamed beneath her feet. The air smelled like expensive perfume and too much ambition. Every surface sparkled. Every voice was quiet. This wasn't just a bank. This was a temple of status. And she had just stepped in without a mask of wealth. Heads turned. Some stared. Some looked through her like she was part of the floor. A security guard by the door shifted his stance. Big guy, folded arms, one brow raised. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Danielle didn't make eye contact. She didn't flinch. Instead, she walked over to the self-service kiosk and tapped the screen. Take a number. Wait your turn. Stay invisible. She pulled her ticket and scanned the waiting area. Leather chairs, gold accents, the sound of heels on tile and fingers tapping phone screens. The people here wore power like it was sewn into their suits. Danielle took a seat near the back. Quiet, patient, steady. She didn't miss the glances. A man 3 chairs over leaned slightly away, like poverty was contagious. A woman in a beige blazer adjusted her handbag, then stared down at her phone with exaggerated focus. Danielle stayed still, hands folded, eyes calm. She'd been here before. Not this building, not this exact chair, but this moment, this feeling, this invisible line drawn between us and them. At the front desk, a young blonde teller laughed too loud. Tight skirt, sharp nails, smug eyes. Her name tag said Rachel Dunham. She leaned in to whisper something to her coworker. Both women laughed again. They were looking at Danielle. She didn't react. Instead, she watched. A black janitor in her work uniform walked up to the counter. Her voice was soft, unsure. "Excuse me, I can't figure out how to get a number." Rachel barely looked up. "The screen is right there, ma'am. It's self-explanatory." The woman nodded quickly, mumbled, "Sorry," and stepped back, eyes low, face red. No help, no patience, just protocol. Next to the kiosk, an elderly black man asked if he could speak to someone about his savings. The teller didn't stop typing. She just said, "If you don't have an appointment, you will have to wait. We're very busy this morning." Danielle watched it all, and then from the corner of her eye, she noticed someone else struggling, an old white woman, late 70s, maybe older. Silver hair, floral scarf, hands trembling as she tried to press buttons on the screen. Nothing worked. Employees saw her. None moved. So Danielle stood. "Need a hand with that?" she asked gently. The old woman looked up, relieved. "Oh, thank you, dear. These machines never like me." Danielle smiled, tapped through the screen, handed her the printed number and guided her to a seat. "You're an angel," the woman said softly. "Just decent," Danielle replied and walked back to her seat. But before she could sit, she heard a whisper behind her. "Rachel. They really do stick together, don't they? Poor helping poor." The words weren't loud, but they were meant to be heard. Danielle froze for half a second, not in shock, just in confirmation, because that was the point of today. She didn't dress like this by accident. She didn't come alone for no reason. She was here for one thing only, the truth. And now she had it. Not just the comments, not just the stares, but the quiet systems, the dismissiveness, the assumptions, the rot beneath the marble. They didn't know who she was. They didn't recognize the name on her ID. They had no idea she signed the checks that paid the staff. Danielle Brooks was the CEO of Dominion Capital Bank. She owned this place. But today, they thought she was just another black woman with no business being there. So she sat down, crossed her legs, and smiled just a little, because it was almost time. Danielle checked the number in her hand, A119. The screen above the service counter flashed A113. She had time. Not that she was in any rush. She wasn't here to make a deposit. She wasn't here to talk about mortgage rates or refinance options. She was here to watch. And what she saw only confirmed what she feared. Across the lobby, a young black man in a warehouse uniform stood at the teller window. Early 30s, nervous posture. He handed over his ID and a paycheck. "I need to cash this," he said quietly. The teller frowned. "Do you have an account with us?" "No, ma'am." She paused, then turned the check over. "You'll need a second form of ID and a manager's signature, and there's a $15 fee." He blinked. "But it's from your bank." "Policy," she said, already reaching for a red stamp. The man sighed, stepped back, defeated. A few minutes later, a woman, white, maybe mid-40s, walked up with a check too. Same situation. No account. Same teller. "No worries," the teller said with a smile. "You're good to go. No second ID, no manager, no fee." Danielle didn't need a spreadsheet. She didn't need a focus group. The evidence was right in front of her. She turned her head slowly. The young janitor woman who had been brushed off earlier still stood by the kiosk, trying to figure out her number. Her hand trembled as she reached up again. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Danielle asked, standing again. The woman looked surprised. "Oh, I don't want to bother anyone." "You're not. Here." Danielle stepped up, tapped the screen, printed the number, and handed it to her. Rachel was watching. Again. She leaned toward her coworker, not even trying to be subtle this time. It's like she's trying to play savior of the broke. Danielle met her eyes. No smile, no frown, just stillness. Rachel flinched first. A few seats away, a teenage boy, black, hoodie, backpack, stood when his number flashed. He walked up to the desk and asked about opening a student checking account. The teller didn't look impressed. "What kind of income do you have? Do you have parental consent?" "We'll need proof of enrollment." His voice cracked. "I have a job." "Oh, sure," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't the questions that were offensive. It was the tone. The tone that said, "Prove it. Justify yourself. You don't belong here unless you can overcompensate." Danielle had heard that tone her whole life, and apparently it still echoed inside her own walls. Back at the waiting area, the woman with the Louis Vuitton bag from earlier stood up. Her number had been skipped. She walked straight to the counter and said, with zero hesitation, "I'm not waiting anymore. I just need to wire something. It'll take 2 seconds." The teller didn't argue. She smiled. "Right this way." No fuss, no ticket, no waiting. Danielle leaned back in her chair. There it was again. 2 different banks inside the same building. One for the polished, one for the questioned. A man in a designer coat was greeted with, "Mr. Andrews, so good to see you again." A woman in scrubs got, "What's your business with us today?" And yet, every one of them walked through the same doors. Danielle tapped her knee once, then again. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was clarity. Because when she looked around, she didn't just see customers. She saw stories, struggles, people who walked through that door hoping for help and got humiliated instead. And the worst part? This was her branch. A place that bore her name at the top of every internal memo. A place that used her face in the Black History Month newsletter. A place where people like Rachel had probably attended diversity and inclusion trainings twice a year, and then walked right back out here and did this. A man with a walker struggled to push the door open at the entrance. No one moved. Danielle got up. She walked to the door, held it open, helped him in, smiled. He looked at her with tired eyes and said, "Thank you. Most folks don't bother." Yet Danielle's answer was simple. They should. She walked him to the kiosk, helped him get a number. And again, every movement watched. Some stared with confusion, some with judgment, some with quiet curiosity. But nobody offered to help. She returned to her seat. A118. Almost her turn. She looked down at the card in her hand, the number printed in bold. And for the first time that morning, she smiled. Because now she had seen enough. And soon everyone else would see too. The number on the screen flashed. A1119. Danielle stood. The room didn't notice. No one looked up. Not yet. She approached the counter, stepped slow, composed. The teller barely glanced at her. "Hi," Danielle said softly. "I need to make a withdrawal." Okay, the teller replied, still typing. Your account number? Danielle slid her ID and card forward. The teller picked them up without a second look. But something in her fingers paused. A small twitch. A shift in posture. She looked at the screen again, then up at Danielle, then back down, then up again. The number didn't match the appearance. Her eyes narrowed. How much are you trying to withdraw? 72,000, Danielle replied calmly. The teller blinked, slowly, once. 70,000? She repeated, louder than necessary. A few heads turned. Danielle didn't move, didn't blink. Yes, from my personal account. The silence around them wasn't loud, but it was thick, like fog before a storm. The teller Rachel straightened her back and forced a smile. Just a moment, she said tightly. I'll need to verify something. Of course you will, Danielle thought. Of course you will. As Rachel picked up the phone and started dialing, Danielle's eyes drifted to the glass wall of the branch. Beyond it, the city kept moving. People crossed streets, hailed cabs, sipped overpriced coffee. But her mind wasn't there anymore. Southside Chicago, 1989. The floor was cold, old linoleum, cracked in spots. Danielle's socks had holes in them, but her mama said if you walk fast enough, you won't feel it. Her father's work boots sat by the door, still covered in concrete dust. He was already gone, out before sunrise again. Her mother hummed while sweeping the kitchen, uniform already on. Dark green janitor's shirt, name tag, Lorraine. Hands rough from chemicals, smile soft anyway. Danielle sat at the table chewing toast with no butter, just sugar and cinnamon. Mama, she said, why do they always look at us like that at the bank? Her mother paused. The broom stopped moving. Like what, baby? Like we're not supposed to be there. Her mother knelt beside her, brushing crumbs from Danielle's lap. Because some folks think money makes you better. But it don't. She tapped her daughter's heart. This does. Danielle nodded but didn't understand. Not yet. A few days later, she stood beside her dad at the bank counter. He wore his best jacket. His face was still dusty from work. The teller didn't smile. She asked twice for his ID, then said the signature didn't match. She made him wait. She made him fill out the form again. He kept apologizing. Danielle wanted to scream. On the way home, he said nothing. His knuckles were white around the steering wheel. Danielle asked, why didn't you say anything? He replied quietly, because they don't listen to men who look like me. Not unless they're scared. That night, she wrote a sentence in her notebook, one she'd never forget. When I grow up, I'll make a bank where nobody gets looked at like that. Present day. Rachel was still on the phone. She glanced at Danielle again, covering the mouthpiece. This will just take a few minutes. Danielle nodded, though she already knew what was happening. She'd built this system. And yet, somehow the rot still lived inside it. It wasn't the software, it wasn't the paperwork. It was the people. The way they measured respect by appearance. The way they held on to subtle power just long enough to remind someone where the line was. And right now, Danielle was standing on the wrong side of it, even in her own bank. The manager stepped out from his office, a tall white man in a sleek gray suit, sharp haircut, expensive shoes, practiced confidence. Thomas Greer. Danielle recognized him instantly. She'd interviewed him once, years ago. He didn't recognize her. What's the issue here? He asked, walking over. Rachel leaned toward him and whispered something that made his brow furrow. He turned to Danielle. Ma'am, he said with a careful, firm tone. This is a large transaction. We'll need to verify your account directly with upper operations. Danielle raised an eyebrow. Is that standard? He hesitated. For transactions above 50,000, yes. Lie. He knew it. She knew it. But she let it hang. She looked around. Every face in the lobby was watching now, some subtle, some not. And suddenly she was 8 years old again, watching her father lower his voice so a white woman behind glass wouldn't call security. Danielle nodded once. Verify it then, she said. Her voice didn't rise, but the room still held its breath. Thomas walked away briskly. Rachel sat stiffly, arms crossed. Danielle just stood there, tall, still, quiet. She wasn't angry. She was patient, because she knew what was coming, and this time nobody was going to walk away unchanged. Southside, Chicago, 1992. The apartment smelled like bleach and hope. Danielle sat on the floor in front of a broken box fan, flipping through a used math workbook that was 2 years out of date. She was 9, small for her age, quiet, already careful with her words. She had learned early that silence kept you safe, and listening taught you everything. Her mom was in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes with hands already raw from cleaning office buildings that weren't hers. Her dad was at the tiny table, opening his pay stub with the slow exhaustion of a man who already knew what it would say. "That's it?" her mom asked without looking up. He didn't answer. Danielle glanced up at him. His shoulders sagged a little. "They cut the hours again," he said. Her mother didn't curse. She never did. She just sighed and scrubbed harder. Danielle looked back down at her workbook, but the numbers blurred. Not because she didn't understand, but because she did. They were trying, and no matter what, the world didn't seem to meet them halfway. 2 days later, she was with her mother at a downtown bank. It wasn't the kind they usually went to. It was one of the fancy ones. Marble floors, real plants, suits. Her mother needed to cash a bonus check from a temp job. They waited in line. When it was finally their turn, the teller glanced at the check, then at her mother's uniform. "We'll need to hold this for 7 days, the teller said flatly. "But it's from your bank," her mom said softly. The teller shrugged. Shrugged. "Still policy." A man in a pinstripe suit walked up 2 windows down, holding a check twice the scale. The teller there smiled like they'd known each other for years. "No hold needed, Mr. Deaton." Danielle watched it all. The way her mother didn't argue. The way she folded the check slowly, like she was trying not to crease her dignity. The way her eyes fell to the floor as they walked out. That night, Danielle stood outside their building under the streetlight. She looked up at the stars, what little she could see through the orange haze of city glow, and she made herself a promise. "One day I'll run a bank, and when people like Mama walk in, they'll be treated like they matter." No one heard her right there, but she said it again, out loud, and again, and again. She didn't know how she'd get there, but she knew that someday someone would pay for the way her mother looked when that teller told her no. Present day. Dominion Capital Bank. Thomas Greer hadn't returned yet. Danielle stood still at the counter. Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her seat, tapping the keyboard just to fill the silence. Around them, the room was buzzing, not with words, but with glances. Sideways looks, unspoken questions. A man in line whispered, "Who does she think she is asking for 70 grand like that?" His wife leaned close, probably just trying to pull something. The words didn't sting. They didn't even register as new. They were just familiar. And that was the worst part, because Danielle had fought for years to rise above all this. She'd studied harder than anyone, worked double shifts, slept in libraries, built her name from dust. She had walked into rooms where no one looked like her and made them listen. She had signed deals that changed cities, sat across from billionaires, turned failing branches into case studies. But still, when she dressed down and stepped in through the front door of her own bank, all it took was a $15 backpack and no makeup for them to see her as less. Less than worthy, less than legitimate. A woman at the window nearby was whispering to her teller now. They were both glancing Danielle's way. Danielle didn't move. A118, the number still blinked on the screen behind her. No one had cleared it, like even the system was waiting to see how this would end. And then, the memory came. Her dad's hands, big, rough, trembling just slightly when he filled out a deposit slip. Danielle had sat beside him, a school bag in her lap, legs swinging just above the ground. He'd smiled at the teller, an older white woman with short blonde hair and a permanent scowl. She looked at the form, then at him, then at Danielle. "You'll need to rewrite this," she said. "It's not neat enough." Her father's smile didn't change. He nodded, rewrote it. When he slid it back across, she sighed. "You didn't fill out the memo line." He apologized. Again. Danielle watched the whole thing silent, her chest tight, her eyes burning. On the walk home, she said, "She was mean to you." He just said, "Some people need to feel big, even if it means making someone else small." Back at the counter, Rachel cleared her throat. "Would you like to take a seat while you wait?" Danielle turned to her. The look in her eyes stopped Rachel mid-sentence. "No," Danielle said simply. "I'll stand." Just then, Thomas reappeared from the office. His expression was unreadable, but his pace was quicker now. He walked past the desk, nodded at Rachel, and motioned Danielle to step aside with him. They walked toward a quieter corner of the lobby. He turned to her, voice low. I've checked with our internal systems and, well, your account is verified. Danielle didn't answer. He cleared his throat. Still, large cash withdrawals like this, they raise red flags. Do they? She asked, voice even. Yes, I'm sure you understand. Danielle took a deep breath. I do, she said, but I think you should be very, very sure of who you're speaking to right now. Thomas Greer looked at Danielle, trying to keep his expression neutral, but his voice was tight. A little too firm, a little too practiced. We've had incidents before, he said. People posing as account holders, forging credentials. You can't blame us for being cautious. Danielle stared at him, still, silent, calculating. Cautious is fine, she said evenly. Disrespect is not. Thomas flinched. Ma'am, with all due respect, don't call me ma'am to soften your tone while implying I'm a liar. He opened his mouth to respond, but froze when her gaze didn't break. This wasn't the voice of someone bluffing. This was someone who'd been here before, too many times. Someone who was done being polite. Danielle stepped closer. Your teller flagged me because of how I look, not because of anything wrong on my ID, not because of a system alert, not because of fraud. She paused. So let's call this what it is, profiling. Thomas bristled. I think you're overreacting. Danielle smiled cold, controlled. And I think you just proved my point. He shifted in place, then waved toward the front desk. Two security guards approached, quiet, firm, neutral-faced. Is there a problem here, Mr. Greer? One asked. Yes, Thomas said without hesitation. I need this customer escorted from the premises. She's being disruptive. Danielle raised an eyebrow. Disruptive, she repeated. Yes, Thomas replied, raising her voice, intimidating staff, creating a scene. She hadn't raised her voice once. Danielle looked at the guards. They were both black. They glanced at each other, then at her. She could see it in their eyes. Confusion, hesitation. One of them stepped forward carefully. Ma'am, if you could come with us. Danielle didn't move, not yet. Instead, she turned to Rachel, who was now standing at her desk, arms crossed, watching the whole thing unfold like it was a bad TV show. Do you want to weigh in, Rachel? Danielle asked. Do you want to tell them exactly what I did that was so disruptive? Rachel blinked. You refused to cooperate. By asking for my money, Rachel swallowed hard, and Danielle turned back to the guards. Gentlemen, I'm not leaving, and I'm certainly not being removed for expecting the same respect as any other customer. Thomas took a step closer. You're causing a disturbance, and I won't tolerate it in this branch. His voice had risen now, too loud, deliberately loud, enough to make customers look, enough to paint a picture. Angry black woman, unreasonable, aggressive, dangerous. Danielle heard it in his tone. It was an old script. He was just reading the lines. She reached into her jacket, slow, deliberate, visible. Both guards instinctively tensed, but she didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out her phone and hit record. Say that again, she said calmly. Thomas paused, his eyes flicked to the phone. Say what? He asked. Say exactly what you just said to the security guards. Into the camera. He hesitated. You see, Danielle continued, voice steady, I want the world to hear what happens when a woman comes into a bank dressed simply, asks for her own money, and gets threatened with removal. Thomas stepped back slightly. Customers were watching now, openly, some pulling out their own phones. A man by the ATM whispered, You filming this? A woman nodded. Yep, got it all. The air in the bank had changed. The quiet control, the polished, practiced chill, was cracking. Danielle lowered her phone but didn't stop recording. Call the police, Thomas said finally. The words dropped like bricks. Rachel's eyes widened. The guards froze. Call them, he repeated. This is now a trespassing issue. Danielle didn't blink. I'll wait right here. Thomas stormed off toward the office. Rachel stayed behind, looking uncertain for the first time. The two security guards didn't escort Danielle out. They just stood near her, still, awkward, waiting. One leaned slightly in, voice low. You okay, ma'am? Danielle nodded. I'm used to it, she said quietly. But this time, I'm not letting it slide. 15 minutes later, two officers walked into the branch. Clean uniforms, badges shining under the halogen lights. They approached Thomas first. He pointed toward Danielle, speaking quickly, gesturing, painting the picture. The taller officer nodded and walked toward her. Danielle stood her ground, phone still in hand. Officer, she said clearly, my name is Danielle Brooks. I'm a client at this bank. I presented my ID, my account was verified, and I requested a withdrawal. I was flagged because of how I look, and now I'm being accused of being disruptive, despite recording everything. The officer's expression didn't change, but he glanced toward her phone. You recorded everything? From the moment the teller called over the manager. Yes. He nodded. His partner walked over to confirm with the guards. They said nothing had gotten physical. No raised voice, no threats. The officer looked at Danielle again. I'd like to see your ID. She handed it over. He scanned it, paused, blinked, then looked up sharply. Wait a minute. Danielle waited. His eyes met hers again, this time slower, with dawning realization. He handed the ID back carefully. One moment, he said, and walked back to Thomas. They spoke in hushed tones. Thomas's face shifted, color drained. He looked up at Danielle again, but this time not as a threat. Now it was recognition. Now it was fear. And Danielle just stood there, watching it all burn. The lobby had fallen silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The two officers stood near the entrance, exchanging a few more hushed words with the branch manager. Thomas Greer's face was stiff, frozen in a polite panic, the kind worn by men who just realized they'd miscalculated badly and publicly. Across the room, Danielle stood still, shoulders squared, chin steady, phone still in her hand, still recording. She didn't need to say a word. The air was already speaking for her. Customers were murmuring quietly now, some recording, others just watching. They all knew something had shifted. They just didn't know what. Finally, the taller officer turned and walked back toward Danielle. His voice was calm, respectful. Ma'am, can I confirm something with you directly? She nodded. Your name is Danielle Brooks? Yes. Danielle Brooks, as in Dominion Executive Danielle Brooks. Her reply was simple, controlled, measured. No. The officer blinked. Then Danielle pulled something from the inside pocket of her jacket, a slim, black leather wallet. She flipped it open, slowly visible to everyone. Inside was a sleek, dark ID card, black and gold. CEO, Dominion Capital Holdings. Danielle M. Brooks. The officer read it twice, then looked up. His posture changed. He stepped back, just slightly instinctively adjusting his stance. Not out of fear, out of recognition. Danielle slipped the wallet shut and placed it gently on the counter beside her, then turned to face the entire room. Rachel's mouth opened slightly. The blood drained from her face. Across the lobby, Thomas was still talking to the second officer, but when the word CEO made it back to him, his voice trailed off mid-sentence. He turned, his eyes met Danielle's, and for the first time since this began, he looked small. Danielle stepped forward, just one step. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Mr. Greer, she said. He didn't answer. Would you like to repeat your earlier accusation now that we're all aware who I am? His lips parted. Nothing came out. The officer beside him turned slightly, giving him room as if to say, you're on your own now. Danielle let the silence stretch. You called the police on your CEO, she continued. You tried to have me removed from my own branch because I didn't match your idea of what wealth looks like. Thomas swallowed hard. Ms. Brooks, I didn't. No, she cut in, voice sharp as glass. You did. You assumed, and you escalated, and you lied. In front of customers, in front of staff, and now in front of officers. Rachel stepped forward. I didn't know who you were. Danielle turned slowly, her gaze pinned Rachel in place. Why would that matter? Rachel opened her mouth, then stopped. Because the answer was obvious. Everything they'd done was based on the assumption that she was no one, and that's what made it worse. What if I wasn't the CEO? Danielle asked aloud. Would that have made your behavior acceptable? The question landed like a stone in a still pond. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt the ripple. No one answered. Danielle walked over to the teller window where her ID and bank cards still sat untouched. She picked them up calmly. This wasn't about a withdrawal, she said to no one in particular. It was a test, one I've been running for months, quietly, branch by branch. Her eyes swept across the lobby, and this branch just failed spectacularly. Across the street, a reporter with a long lens caught the moment the officer stepped back from Danielle and nodded toward the crowd. The image would go viral within the hour. The black CEO they tried to remove. The moment power turned without a word. Inside, Thomas was still frozen. He looked at the officers, then at Rachel, then at the other employees gathering near the back hallway, unsure whether to hide or to help. Danielle stepped to the center of the room. "I want every employee here to listen carefully," she said. Her tone was steel. "This bank does not belong to the elite. It does not belong to the wheat with the biggest watch or the client with the glossiest checkbook. It belongs to the people who walk through those doors expecting dignity, expecting respect." She turned back to Thomas. "You are done here." His mouth opened. No appeals, no meetings. Your behavior was documented. Your dismissal will be processed before the end of the day." She looked past him to Rachel. "You are suspended immediately, pending investigation for discriminatory conduct." Rachel looked like she might cry, but said nothing. Danielle turned to the security guards. "Thank you for not forcing this." They nodded, quietly relieved. Finally, she looked around the lobby one last time. "This was never about power," she said. "It was about how you treat people when you think no one's watching." Then she picked up her backpack, placed her wallet back inside, and walked toward the door. But before she reached it, the older officer called out, "Ms. Brooks?" She turned. "You handled that with more grace than most would have." Danielle gave a slight nod. "Grace is easy," she said, "when you already know who you are." And with that, she stepped outside, into the light. By the time Danielle Brooks reached the sidewalk, her name was trending in 6 cities. A college student who'd been standing in line near the ATM had uploaded a 48-second clip, grainy, vertical, but unmistakable. This woman just revealed she's the CEO of the bank after being profiled and almost thrown out. "I'm shaking." Hashtag Danielle Brooks had banking while black. 12 minutes later, it hit 1 million views. Inside the Dominion Capital headquarters on 46th Street, 4 executive assistants burst into a meeting room mid-presentation. 3 phones were vibrating on the conference table. A compliance director opened her inbox and froze. Subject, urgent. Media alert. CEO video attachment. Danielle Brooks, lobby footage. MP4. No one needed to hit play. The still image was enough. Danielle at the center of a bank lobby, holding up her CEO badge like a mirror. Across the room, Dominion's general counsel whispered, "Jesus Christ." The head of investor relations pulled out his phone and began calling everyone. Meanwhile, outside the branch, Danielle didn't stop walking. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't wave to the curious onlookers now gathering by the corner. She just moved forward, calm, composed, like a storm that had already passed but left lightning behind. 10:42 a.m. Dominon's private board group chat lit up. Is this real? Where was security? Who was the manager? Has legal been looped? She was running a sting on her own team? The chairman of the board didn't type. He just texted one thing directly to Danielle. "Call me now." She didn't. Inside the branch, Thomas Greer had locked his office door. It didn't help. A senior HR officer had already arrived, escorted by regional security. He knocked once, then entered without waiting for permission. "Mr. Greer," he said flatly, "your badge has been deactivated. You'll be escorted from the premises within 5 minutes. Say nothing to the media." Thomas didn't argue. He didn't speak. He just sat down and stared at his reflection in the dark computer screen. Rachel, meanwhile, had been quietly moved to a back room. Her hands trembled, not because she feared punishment, but because she finally understood what she had done. She wasn't fired, not yet, but her name was already circulating in internal HR threads. The footage had captured everything: her tone, her body language, her dismissive eyes, and worse, her silence when things escalated. Across the city, the story had legs. CNBC Black CEO profiled inside her own bank branch. This was a test. CN, Dominion Capital, faces backlash. After viral video of CEO's covert visit, Bloomberg shares dip 4%. After leadership crisis, sparks viral outrage. NPR, Danielle Brooks in the quiet revolution in banking. And on Twitter, the hashtag Danielle Brooks was joined by another. Power in plain clothes, a single photo snap by a bystander was going viral. Danielle, stepping through the glass doors of Dominion's flagship branch, backpack on one shoulder, cap low, head high. The caption read, "She didn't come to play power games, she came to check the soul of her company." Back at headquarters, the chairman finally got through. Danielle picked up on the third ring. "Danielle," he began, "what the hell just happened?" She let the silence hold for a beat before answering. "What you saw," she said, "is exactly what I wanted to happen." He exhaled sharply. "You ran an internal operation without notifying the board?" "Yes. And now our stock is sliding, and every media outlet is calling it a corporate implosion." "It's not an implosion," she replied. "It's a correction." He was silent. Danielle continued, "You all wanted the metrics to change diversity, culture, ethics, but none of you wanted the discomfort that comes with it. This is that discomfort. This is what it takes to clean house." The chairman sighed. "What's your plan?" Danielle's voice didn't waver. "Full compliance audit, mandatory bias training tied to bonus eligibility, anonymous feedback lines, and real consequences." She paused. "Starting with the termination of everyone involved today." Another pause. "You're not worried about blowback?" "Only from people who never should have been here in the first place." Noon, Dominion Capital's official Twitter account finally posted, "We are aware of the incident involving our CEO, Danielle Brooks. We take these matters seriously. Full internal review underway. More to come." The replies were immediate and brutal. "She was the internal review. You failed her and yourselves. Don't post statements, post resignations." Back in her office, Danielle finally sat down. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaled slowly. Not from relief, not from regret, from clarity. This wasn't about going viral. This wasn't about punishing one branch. This was about shaking the foundation so it could be rebuilt better. She opened her laptop, drafted the email. Subject, immediate organizational reforms, Phase 1. To all staff from Danielle M. Brooks, CEO. Today I walked into one of our branches and saw what many of you already knew. We have a culture problem. Not everywhere, but enough. Enough that good people are being mistreated. Enough that silence has become safer than honesty. Enough that respect is conditional on how someone dresses, speaks, or looks. That ends now, not with words, with actions. The following reforms will begin this week. And she kept typing. Not because it would look good in the news, but because the people she used to be, the girl with the holes in her shoes, the father who waited quietly, the mother who smiled through humiliation, they were still watching. They called it the Brooks effect. Within 36 hours of the incident, Dominion Capital's website had more traffic than it had during any previous quarter. Customers flooded the helplines, some to complain, some to cancel accounts, but most to say one thing: thank her. They wrote messages, they sent flowers. They didn't speak like clients. They spoke like people who had finally been seen. Across the country, branches began holding emergency town halls. Regional directors scrambled to rewrite protocol manuals. Frontline staff, usually numb to corporate memos, were now reading every word of Danielle's internal email like it was gospel. At one location in Detroit, an elderly black woman walked in, wearing a faded coat and church shoes. The young teller at the desk stood up as she approached, not out of fear, but out of respect. She blinked when he opened the door for her. "You don't have to do all that," she said, a little surprised. "Ma'am," he said, "I do." On Reddit, a post titled, "I saw Danielle Brooks stand up for all of us," hit the front page. It was written by someone anonymous at first. Just a username, quiet, window, Tom. "I was in the waiting area. I saw how they looked at her. I saw how she didn't flinch. I saw how calm she was when they escalated it. And when she pulled out that badge, it was the most powerful thing I've ever witnessed. Not because she was the CEO, but because she didn't need to yell. She didn't need to perform power. She just stood there and made the room feel small. The comments exploded. Bookmarking this for my daughters. We need this woman in office. This is leadership, period. Later that night, the user updated the post. My name's Maya. I'm a teller at that branch. I was working the back desk. I didn't say anything that day. I just watched. I've thought about that every hour since. So I'm saying it now. I'm sorry. I'm learning. And I'm staying. The next morning, Danielle received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Folded neatly in a plain white envelope. It read, Miss Brooks, I saw what they did to you. I've had them do it to me too. Just without the cameras. You didn't just defend yourself. You defended the rest of us who walk into those rooms knowing they've already made up their minds. Thank you for not staying silent. Someone who never forgot what it feels like. Danielle kept it in her top drawer. Internally, changes began to move fast. The branch where it happened was officially placed under direct review. Thomas Greer's termination was finalized. His access revoked. His benefits frozen pending investigation. Rachel, the teller, requested a personal hearing with HR. She didn't defend herself. She didn't cry. She owned it, and when asked if she had anything to say to Danielle, I do, she said, but I'll say it when I've earned the right to be in the same room again. Meanwhile, Dominion's employee dashboard added something new. Anonymous customer treatment reports. Public progress logs per branch. Employee mentorship sign-up led by senior leadership within a week. Over 9,200 employees opted in. Some did it out of fear, some out of pressure, but many because they were ready. Then came the press conference. Danielle didn't want one. She wasn't interested in going viral again. But when asked to address the nation, she agreed on one condition. I'm not making a statement, she said. I'm telling a story. So on a rainy Thursday afternoon, flanked by no PR reps, no teleprompters, no polished entourage, she stood at a modest podium in a public library on the Lower East Side and spoke plainly. This week, I walked into one of my own branches dressed in a way that made people underestimate me. I did it on purpose, not to trick anyone, but to show how many of us are still treated when the titles are stripped away. I wasn't loud, I wasn't rude, I wasn't disruptive, but I was still removed. Why? Because to them, someone like me didn't belong, even if I signed their paychecks. And I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because this is what happens to thousands of people every day without headlines. So we're changing that, not just here, but everywhere we can reach. This isn't a warning. This is a beginning. The room was quiet, not because of lack of applause, but because no one wanted to break the spell. Later that night, Dominion's headquarters received a donation of $25,000 from Equal Ground, a racial equity nonprofit earmarked for employee retraining. Attached was a note, not for branding, not for PR, for the people who saw her and chose to change anyway. Danielle posted the note on the staff bulletin board the next morning. No caption, no fanfare, just truth. Somewhere in the city, Maya Quiet Window 2 sat at her kitchen table, filling out a new application. It wasn't for a promotion. It wasn't for praise. It was to become a mentor in Dominion's Respect First initiative. She didn't think she was perfect. She didn't even think she was ready. But she remembered something Danielle had said on the news. You don't need to be a hero to make change. You just need to be honest and consistent. Maya clicked submit. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. The knock came just after 8:30 p.m. Danielle was still in her office. The floor was quiet, just the hum of machines, the glow of city lights pouring in through glass. She had no meeting scheduled. The assistant had gone home. The security guard downstairs hadn't called. Another knock, gentler this time. She stood, walked to the door, opened it slowly, and froze. Hi, kid, the man said. His hair was mostly gray now. His jacket a bit too big. His eyes, those same eyes worn, but clear. Dad? James Brooks smiled. I figured you wouldn't be hard to find these days. Danielle opened the door wider without a word. He stepped in slowly, hat in hand. Same denim jeans he always wore. Same careful way of moving, as if not wanting to take up too much space. They sat across from each other, not behind the desk, on the couch. No titles, just history. Danielle watched him like she was trying to memorize a photograph. Finally, she spoke. How long have you been in town? Couple days. Saw what happened. Figured you were probably a little busy. She chuckled, soft, involuntary. Just a little. He nodded, serious again. I didn't come to say anything that the world hasn't already said. So why now? He looked at her, long and steady. Because there's something the world doesn't know. She tilted her head. What's that? He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, worn soft like cloth. He handed it to her. Danielle unfolded it slowly. A deposit slip, handwritten, dated over 30 years ago. The name James Brooks, amount 78 and 34. Memo, payroll deposit, but it wasn't the form that caught her breath. It was the handwriting, shaky, messy, overwritten. I kept it, he said. She looked up. This was the one, he continued. The day you saw me apologize to that teller. The one who made me rewrite it 3 times. You were just a kid, but I saw your face that day. His voice cracked just slightly. You didn't cry out loud, but I saw you trying to understand something you weren't supposed to understand yet. Danielle ran her fingers across the ink. I never forgot it, she whispered. Me neither, he said. That's why I kept it. To remind myself I could take it if it meant you didn't have to. A long silence passed. Finally, James looked around the office. Funny thing, and he said, you built a place they once thought you didn't belong in. She smiled, a little tired. I didn't build it for them. No, he nodded. You built it for people like your mama and me. He paused. And maybe a little for yourself. She didn't deny it. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You know what struck me most watching that video? What? You stood exactly like your mother used to, back straight, hands calm, but the fire in your eyes? All mine. They both laughed. Soft, real, warm. Then he got quiet again. But there's something else. What? He met her gaze. You're carrying more than you should. Danielle blinked. You're doing it right, and he said, but don't forget to let it go too. She looked away, because he was right. The pressure, the weight, the scrutiny. Even victory came with exhaustion. How do you carry something like this, she asked, without it changing you? He didn't hesitate. You don't. It should change you. Just don't let it shrink you. They sat in silence a while longer. Eventually she asked, you hungry? He grinned. Always. They left together. No cameras, no suits, no flash. Just a father and daughter walking down Lexington Avenue, under streetlights toward a late-night diner like any other pair, with too much to say and not enough time. The next morning, Danielle returned to her office before sunrise. She placed the old deposit slip in a frame, set it on the corner of her desk, not to flaunt, not to mourn, but to remember where it started, who paid the price, and who refused to let it end there. By Friday morning, Danielle Brooks had become more than a CEO. She was a case study, a symbol, a headline. Her name was cited on the Senate floor, referenced in a Harvard ethics course, quoted by an EU commissioner discussing economic equity. But she hadn't given another interview, hadn't made another speech. She was back in the office, writing policies. That afternoon, her assistant knocked lightly and stepped in. Ms. Brooks, you have a call. Tell them to schedule it. It's from Washington, she said, White House. Danielle looked up, just slightly. Who? Chief of Staff for the Vice President. She says it's urgent. Danielle took the call standing. The voice on the other end was crisp, direct, not rehearsed. Ms. Brooks, thank you for taking the time. Vice President Wilcox would like to speak with you personally. Danielle didn't flinch. Now? Now. A few clicks, then another voice came on, lower, more measured. Danielle, this is Cassandra Wilcox. She knew the name. Everyone did. Former civil rights attorney, current VP, known for her steel spine and velvet tone. Madam Vice President, Danielle said, cool and professional. I won't waste your time, Wilcox said. I watched the footage, twice. Then I read everything. Then I called you. Danielle waited. We need to talk, Wilcox continued. Not about the fallout, about the opportunity. Danielle raised an eyebrow even though no one could see. Go on. 20 minutes later, Danielle sat in silence. The call had ended. The wait remained. The vice president had offered her something that didn't come through job boards or back channels, a seat on a federal oversight task force designed to audit systemic discrimination in banking, finance, and capital access. But that wasn't all. They didn't want her as a consultant. They wanted her to lead it. That evening, in a private conference room overlooking Midtown, Dominion's board gathered for an emergency session, not to reprimand Danielle, but to ask a single question. If she accepts this federal position, what happens to Dominion? There was tension in the room, but also respect. She's done more in 2 weeks than we've done in 2 years, someone muttered. The chairman nodded. But if she leaves, a new voice cut in. If she leaves, we follow her lead anyway. A pause, then quiet assent. Across the country, Wall Street circles were already buzzing. BlackRock, Goldman, Morgan. Every firm suddenly remembered her name. Some offered her speaking gigs, others hinted at board positions, but none of it moved her. The only offer she cared about was the one that threatened the silence at scale. Later that night, Danielle sat at her kitchen table, the same one she'd bought secondhand 8 years ago. Her laptop open, a pros and cons list unfinished. She stared at it for a long time, then closed the screen, picked up her phone, called one person. You know what you're gonna say? Her father asked. Danielle looked out the window, watching the city blink beneath her. I think so. You scared? A little, he chuckled. Good. Means you still got skin in the game. Danielle smiled. You think I should take it? James Brooks was quiet for a long time. Then, I think the girl who watched me swallow my pride in a lobby 30 years ago would take it. Monday morning. Danielle stepped into a press room she hadn't requested, wearing the same no-nonsense blazer she'd worn at the start of her CEO term. The cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. She stood behind the podium. No teleprompter, just a small card in her palm. She didn't read it. She spoke directly. This isn't a resignation. This is a reassignment. Starting next month, I'll be leading a joint federal initiative focused on ending systemic financial discrimination nationwide. My role at Dominion will shift, not disappear, because fixing one bank isn't enough. We need to rebuild the blueprint. And it's time that people who know injustice from the inside help draw it. The room erupted, not with applause, but with urgency. Media anchors scrambled. Investors braced. Politicians drafted statements before the stream even ended. Danielle stepped down from the podium. No smile, just purpose. That afternoon, the vice president posted a photo. Danielle seated beside her at a table stacked with case files and reform plans. Captioned, "We don't need more titles, we need more truth." At Dominion's Midtown branch, the one where it all began, Maya watched the photo appear on the monitors above the teller line. She whispered to herself, she didn't just change the rules, she changed the room. Weeks passed, the headlines faded, the hashtags cooled, the algorithms moved on. But inside the offices of Dominion Capital, change didn't die with the spotlight. It settled, quietly, methodically, like roots. In every branch, the walls looked the same, but something in the air had shifted. Tellers stood a little straighter when customers entered. Managers listened a little longer before making assumptions. Staff meetings began with one new question. How are we showing respect this week? Not as a slogan, not as a campaign, as a culture. The Respect First initiative, once an internal experiment, became policy across 22 states. Danielle never branded it, she never trademarked it, she just made sure it outlived her title. On her last day as full-time CEO, Danielle didn't throw a party, she didn't give a speech, she didn't send a mass email. Instead, she returned to the Manhattan branch where it all began. Not through the front, through the side entrance, the one employees used, no press, no security, just a dark blazer, a quiet morning, and the worn backpack she'd never thrown away. She walked through the lobby, slowly, every head turned, but not in fear, not in judgment, in recognition. Some smiled, some nodded, some just stood a little taller, remembering. She approached the front desk. Behind it was Maya, not the same Maya who once posted anonymously. This Maya stood different now, a little bolder, a little clearer, eyes forward, voice strong. "Good morning, Ms. Brooks," she said. Danielle smiled. "Maya, your appointment's confirmed. Conference room B." "Thank you." Maya hesitated, then added softer, "It's an honor." Danielle met her gaze. "You earned it." Inside the conference room, a small group waited. No executives, no press, just 6 employees, new hires and veterans. Black, white, Asian, Latinx. Tellers, trainers, security, reception. They were the first cohort of a new internal program. CLEAR. Culture, leadership, equity, accountability, respect. Danielle sat with them, not as a teacher, as a listener. They talked, they shared, they asked hard questions. She didn't offer all the answers, she just offered her truth. "I didn't create this movement. I just refused to keep pretending it wasn't needed. Your job isn't to be perfect. Your job is to stay awake. Because once you know better, you don't get to go back to sleep." After the session ended, she stayed behind a few extra minutes. Maya slipped in. "They loved you," she said, grinning. Danielle raised an eyebrow. "They challenged me." "Same thing." Danielle stood, walked over to the framed photograph hanging near the window. It was new, black and white, a candid shot Danielle in mid-turn, her ID badge visible, her eyes calm. Beneath it, a simple brass plate. "Dignity belongs to everyone who walks through these doors." No title, no date, just a truth. Danielle stared at it for a long moment. "I never meant to be in the frame," she said. Maya smiled. "Sometimes the frame finds you." Outside, the city buzzed as always. But inside, something was still. Danielle stepped back into the lobby. The staff didn't freeze. They didn't whisper. They just nodded as she passed, not out of awe, out of alignment. She stopped briefly near the velvet chair in the corner, the one where it all began. A man sat there now, older, gray coat, wrinkled ticket in hand. Danielle walked over, knelt beside him. "Sir, are you being helped?" He looked up, surprised. "Oh, I'm just waiting." Bit confused by the machine, honestly. She smiled gently. "Can I walk you through it?" He nodded, and she did. Not because she needed to, because she remembered. At the door, before stepping out, she turned one last time, looked over the room. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was better. And not because of her presence, because of her absence, because they had chosen to keep walking without her hand on their shoulder. And that meant it was working. That night, she returned home, put her bag down, unbuttoned her blazer, and finally sat still. In the silence, her eyes drifted to the small wooden box on her shelf. She opened it. Inside, the original deposit slip from her father, now joined by a second item. A worn name tag, black plastic, white letters, scuffed from use. "Maya, Dominion Bank." She smiled, closed the box, and whispered to no one in particular, "It was worth it."